I'm reading about the South African revolutionary Nelson Mandela.
Why?
Well, because he dedicated all his life to eradicating discrimination based on caste, color, and creed, and establishing equality.
Oh, superb! Wow!
Yes, so let us dedicate today's episode to him and peek into the story of Nelson Mandela. Zoom in. Nelson was named Holishaza Mandela after his birth on the 18th of July 1918 in the village of Viso, located in South Africa. His mother was called Noskini Fanny and his father's name was Henry, who was the head of the tribe called the Tembu. Later, he became the first person in his family to attend school, and when he was 7, his teacher, Miss Mingane, gave him the name Nelson, which stuck with him. He continued to study hard in school despite losing his father at the naive age of 12. And after a few years, he moved to Johannesburg to study law and managed to get a degree at the age of 24. But sadly, at the time that Nelson Mandela was growing up, there was a huge racial divide in South Africa. White authorities handled the country and they generally led privileged lives with better facilities. On the other hand, most Native Africans worked in low-paid jobs and lived in poor communities with poor facilities and weren't even allowed to vote in elections. Nelson was very upset by this discrimination and decided to take a stand against it. So in 1944, he joined the African National Congress, ANC, a political group that strived for equal rights for everyone. But things were getting worse for the local Africans with the introduction of new strict law called apartheid, according to which they were not allowed to live in the same areas as whites, share a table in a restaurant, attend the same schools, or even sit together on a train or bus. So Nelson, who was very inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's struggle for freedom in India, adopted a non-violent movement to protest against the racist law, because of which he was arrested by the ruling authorities. Later, seeing the rising discrimination, Nelson felt the need for a better approach and started building a secret military group called Umkhonto Wesizwe, or Spear of the Nation, to fight foreign powers. But unfortunately, the regime came to know about it and Nelson and 7 other men were arrested for conspiring to overthrow the government and were given life sentences. Nelson would spend the next 27 years behind bars. However, he never gave up on his principles despite being offered freedom twice and used his time to learn new things like new languages, poems, and writing. With time, Nelson's struggle for equality gained more popularity and support from around the world, and due to an increase in political and public pressure, he was released early from prison in 1990. Then he continued his fight against apartheid, which came to an end by 1993. And in 1994, due to his protest, the native Africans were finally allowed to vote, and Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. Then in 1999, Nelson Mandela retired as president, but continued to work for equality, peace, and freedom through his non-profit organization, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, until he took his last breath on 5th December 2013 at the age of 95 due to lung infection. But his legacy will always remain alive, and he will forever be remembered.
Trivia time!
Did you know Nelson Mandela and Frederick William de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993? Also, in 2009, Nelson's birthday, 18 July, was officially named Nelson Mandela Day. Hope you learned something new today. Until next time, it's me, Dr. Binocs, zooming out.
And this year's Nobel Prize in Physics, Peace and Literature goes to Dr. Binocs. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you all. Whoa! Oh, you are all here already, friends. And I know you must be wondering what's the connection between dynamite and the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, to know that, please stick with us to hear the story of Alfred Nobel. Zoom in. On October 21st, 1833, in Stockholm, Sweden, the house of Henriette and Emmanuel Nobel echoed with a delightful giggle of a baby boy named Alfred Nobel. As time progressed, Alfred grew into an intelligent and curious kid. But unfortunately, he often had to miss school due to sickness and poverty, as his father went bankrupt twice in his lifetime. Because of this, in 1842, when Alfred was just 9, the family had to move to Russia for better opportunities. Fortunately, slowly, his father's business of providing war equipment for the Russian army settled well there. But little Alfred wasn't satisfied with the work in the factory and always wondered why people needed war. So, to express his emotions during his teens, Alfred took interest in writing poetries. But later, his father was not pleased with Alfred's love for poems and decided to send the young man to Paris to become a chemical engineer. Over there, he met a young Italian chemist, Ascanio Sobrero, who had invented nitroglycerine, a highly explosive liquid. Alfred became very interested in nitroglycerine and wondered how it could be used in construction work. And after years of failed experiments, he finally managed to convert the liquid into a soft paste for safer use and named his invention dynamite. This brought a revolution in the construction industry, and despite a few big hurdles on the way, Alfred Nobel never looked back and became a highly successful businessman and philanthropist. But on a personal front, Alfred Nobel never got married or had a family of his own. This became a dilemma while writing his will about what would happen to his fortune after his death. And as Alfred Nobel was deeply distressed by the fact that his inventions of explosives could take many lives, he wanted to find a way that would lead to world peace. On top of that, he was very inspired by his good friend named Bertha von Suttner, who was very active in the peace movement and wrote the famous book, lay down your arms." Thus he wrote a will to use much of his wealth to give prizes to those who have done their best for humanity in the field of physics, chemistry, physiology, medicine, and peace. Then on December 10th, 1896, in San Remo, Italy, at his last residence, Alfred Nobel passed away from a stroke. But we will always be thankful to him for initiating this excellent tradition of celebrating the contribution of those who are making this world a better and peaceful place. Trivia time! Did you know the first Nobel Prizes were awarded in 1901? Yes, the event took place at the Royal Academy of Music in Stockholm. Hope you had a peaceful experience today. Until next time, it's me, Dr. Binocs, zooming out. What are you writing, little kitty?
Well, for Kitty Fish Fries.
Oh, never mind.
Hello friends, as we know, UK's beloved Queen Elizabeth II has peacefully left this world. So, in honor of her, let us dedicate this episode to her life and witness the story of Queen Elizabeth II. Zoom in. On the 21st of April 1926, at 17 Bruton Street in London, England, the Duke and Duchess of York celebrated the birth of their first daughter, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary. At the time, her grandfather, King George V, was King of the United Kingdom, and her father, Albert, was the Duke of York, which automatically made young Elizabeth a princess. But despite all the luxuries, the Duke lived quite a simple life and taught the growing princess the value of money and gave her only 5 pence a week as pocket money. The values and education imparted to her helped her to live a mature and grounded life, as she was never expected to be a queen because her father was the second son of King George V. But everything changed for Elizabeth in 1936 with the passing away of her beloved grandfather, King George V, which made her uncle Edward the next king. But to everyone's surprise, her uncle surrendered the crown and her father became the new king of the British Empire. As a result, the 10-year-old Elizabeth became next in line for the throne. Then, as time passed by, Elizabeth began training for her duties and also studied history, languages, and music at home with her younger sister, Margaret Rose. Everything was going well for the royal family, but then World War II broke out in 1939. And after a year, Buckingham Palace was bombed by the Nazis. So Elizabeth, along with her sister, was asked to take shelter at Windsor Castle. And as the hard time passed by, seeing many people suffer due to the war, the teen princess felt a keen sense of duty and asked for permission to join the army. But the royal family couldn't allow the heir to the throne to be put in danger, so they refused. Despite this, the determined princess didn't take no for an answer and kept pushing to serve her people. Seeing her will and commitment, the royal family had no choice but to give her permission to join the service. After she turned 18 in 1945, she joined the Women's Auxiliary Territorial Service, ATS and trained for 6 weeks as an auto mechanic despite all the dangers surrounding it. After a few years, on February 6, 1952, she suffered another major setback due to the passing away of her father. But regardless of the saddening situation, Elizabeth took over her duties and became Queen Elizabeth II. Then on June 2, 1953, her crowning ceremony took place, making her the official Queen of the British Empire. Taking care of this vast empire in post-World War era wasn't a luxury, as there was a lot of turmoil around the globe. But the great Queen Elizabeth II's calmness brought a sense of stability to her nation, and she even helped many former colonies to achieve sovereignty in the most peaceful way. Due to her efforts and service to her people, she became the longest reigning monarch in British history in September 2015. Sadly, after a few years, on 8 September 2022, Queen Elizabeth II took her last breath at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. But she will always remain in every Britisher's heart as their beloved queen. Trivia time! Did you know, growing up, Elizabeth went by the nickname Lilibet? Also, she was the only person in the UK allowed to drive without a license. Hope the Queen's life taught you something new today. Until next time, it's me, Dr. Binocs, zooming out. Dear Kitty. Oh, not you, little kitty. I'm reading a diary of a young girl named Anne Frank.
Frank?
Yes, a brave girl we all must know about. So let's zoom in. Anne Frank, in full Annalise Marie Frank, was born on 12 June 1929 in Frankfurt, Germany, to Jewish parents. Her father, Otto Frank, was a businessman, while her mother, Edith, took care of Anne and her older sister, Margot. As time passed by, Anne grew into an outgoing and free-spirited girl with lots of friends and loved collecting photos and postcards of movie stars. Though everything was going well in her life, however, the same can't be said for Germany, as the Nazis, led by Hitler, came into power, and the Jewish no longer felt safe after that. This forced the Frank family to shift to Netherlands. But unfortunately, after a few years in 1941, the Nazis took over this place too. Anne was forced to transfer from a public school to a Jewish one. Over there, Anne was given a yellow badge, which was an identifying badge to mark Jews, as they weren't allowed to own businesses, have jobs, go to the movies, or even sit on the benches at the park. But this didn't stop the brave girl from dreaming, as she longed for becoming a writer someday. Seeing this, on her 13th birthday, her father gifted her a red and white plaid diary, which she called Kitty, named after her friend. Anne found a sense of hope while writing in her journal about her restricted life. But sadly, things turned worse, as 1 month later, due to increased pressure from the Nazis, the Frank family had to hide in a secret hideout next to her father's place of work in a small room behind a bookshelf. The situation out there was getting worse, as many Jewish were rounded up and taken to concentration camps by Hitler's forces. And inside the secret hideout, Franks had to be careful not to be caught by the Germans and covered all the windows with thick curtains. During the day, they had to be extra quiet. They whispered when they spoke and walked barefoot so that they couldn't be heard. At night, when the people working in the business below went home, they could relax a bit, but they still had to be cautious. And sadly, after hiding for nearly 2 years, on 4th August 1944, her fears turned real when Nazi troops stormed into Frank's hideout and sent them to concentration camps. Over there, after a few months, on a gloomy day in March 1945, both Anne and her sister passed away of the disease typhus, only a month before Allied soldiers arrived at the camp to save the survivors. The only family member to survive the camps was Anne's father, Otto Frank, who returned to Amsterdam and found Anne's diary. Then in 1947, he published the diary under the name The Secret Annex. Later, it was renamed Anne Frank. The Diary of a Young Girl became popular around the world. That serves as a reminder of an ordinary girl's extraordinary life during an awful time in human history. Trivia time! Did you know Anne's diary was published in over 65 different languages? Also, The Diary of a Young Girl has sold more than 30 million copies so far. Hope you learned something historical today. Until next time, it's me, Dr. Binocs, zooming out.
Oh, little kitty, why aren't you participating in the school's essay writing competition?
Kitty can't write. Kitty injured.
Well, if that's the excuse you have, then let me share the incredible journey of Helen Keller, who became a world-renowned author despite being blind, deaf, and mute.
Seriously?
Yes, so let's zoom in. In the enchanting town of Tuscumbia, Alabama, a remarkable soul named Helen Keller came into the world on a bright June 27, 1880. Her father, Arthur Keller, was a captain in the Confederate Army during the American Civil War, and her mother, Kate Adams Keller, was a homemaker and social activist. Helen's next few months went like a normal child, but at the tender age of 19 months, tragedy struck as she lost both her sight and hearing due to an illness most likely identified as either scarlet fever or meningitis. The inability to communicate and understand the world around her left the little kid feeling trapped and isolated. Unable to express her needs and desires, she often resorted to tantrums and outbursts. Concerned for child's well-being, her parents sought advice from Alexander Graham Bell and took 6-year-old Helen to Perkins Institution for the Blind, where they met an experienced teacher, Anne Sullivan, who herself was partially visually impaired. Understanding Helen's situation, Anne began to teach Helen creative activities with love and patience, which helped her calm down her anger issues and slowly transform her into a well-behaved child. Then, to teach Helen reading and writing, her teacher wrote characters on Helen's palms, helping her to learn a lot about the world around her, and with more effort, even things beyond this world. As Helen grew older, she became more loving, and her thirst for knowledge kept growing. So she attended the Perkins School for the Blind, excelling in her studies. At 16 years old, Helen was accepted into Radcliffe College, becoming the first deaf-blind person to pursue higher education. Then at the age of 22, her autobiography, The Story of My Life, came out, which revealed her early childhood experiences, challenges with her impairments, and her extraordinary journey of overcoming them with the guidance of her teacher Anne Sullivan. Then, in 1904, at the age of 24, she graduated with honors, earning a Bachelor of Arts degree and leaving an indelible mark on academia. After this, Helen Keller became a strong advocate for people with disabilities and women's rights. She traveled around the world giving inspiring speeches and fighting for equal opportunities for everyone to show us that no matter our challenges, we can make a difference and create a more inclusive world. Meanwhile, Helen also kept working hard and became a prolific writer, sharing her experiences, thoughts, and insights with the world. Some of her notable works include The World I Live In, where she explores the sensory world through her touch and imagination, and Out of the Dark, a collection of essays on various topics. In her later years, Helen continued her advocacy work, focusing on improving the lives of people with disabilities worldwide. She co-founded Helen Keller International, an NGO dedicated to preventing blindness and malnutrition, and worked tirelessly to raise awareness and support for various causes. Then, on June 1st, 1968, at the age of 87, Helen Keller passed away peacefully in her sleep. But her life continues to inspire generations, reminding us that with unwavering determination and a belief in oneself, we can overcome any obstacle and make a lasting difference in the world. Trivia time! Did you know Helen wrote a total of 12 published books with several articles? Yes, her first writing was written at the age of 11, named The Frost King. Hope you felt inspired today. Until next time, it's me, Dr. Binocs, zooming out. So, Kitty, ready to take part in an essay writing competition?
Kitty, all ready.
Never mind.